They moved me to the basement of the house I built with my own 2 hands. My daughter said I was being selfish for wanting my own room. They thought the old man was finished. They were about to learn this old carpenter still knew how to tear things down. The smell of sawdust always felt like home. It was the smell of hard work, of promises kept, a life built one plank at a time. I ran my hand over the smooth, polished surface of the rocking horse I was finishing in my workshop. Maple, strong wood. It was for the church charity auction. At 65, my days of framing houses were long over, but my hands still needed to work. They still needed to create. This house. It was the first one I ever built entirely on my own. Mary and I poured the foundation together right after we got married, 42 years ago. Every beam, every nail, every slightly imperfect corner held a memory of her. It wasn't a mansion, just a sturdy, comfortable home on a quiet street. It was ours, paid off. It was my security, my sanctuary. If you're listening to this story, please subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're watching from. It helps more than you know. It was my sanctuary, until the day they arrived. The doorbell rang, sharp, insistent. It cut through the quiet afternoon air. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked through the living room, past the fireplace Mary loved so much. The familiar scent of lemon polish and old books hung in the air. I opened the front door. It was my daughter, Jessica, and her husband, Mark. Jessica didn't wait for me to invite her in. She brushed past me. Her expensive perfume filled the hallway. Chemical, overpowering. It clashed with the smell of home. Mark followed. His eyes darted around the living room, not like he was visiting, like he was appraising it, calculating its worth. He always looked like that, restless, hungry, his smile a little too bright, his suits a little too shiny. Something about Mark never felt solid. He was all surface, no foundation. "Dad, we need to talk," Jessica said. She looked stressed. Her makeup was perfect. Her clothes were trendy. Things that mattered more since she married Mark. But the lines around her mouth were tight. She kept twisting the giant diamond ring on her finger. A nervous habit I'd noticed recently. "What's wrong?" I asked. I motioned to the couch Mary had saved for months to buy, the one with the slightly faded floral pattern. Jessica sighed, sinking onto the cushions. Mark remained standing. He walked over to the window, looked out at the oak tree I planted when Jessica was born. "It's Mark's parents," she started. "Robert and Linda. Their condo renovation is delayed. Some major issue with permits and plumbing. It's an absolute disaster." "That's too bad," I said. I didn't know them well, but I knew they were used to comfort and money. "Where are they staying?" "They're in a cramped hotel, Dad. It's awful." She emphasized the word awful like it was a tragedy. "They are miserable, and they are making us miserable." She paused. "They need a place to stay. Just for a couple of weeks, maybe 3. I saw where this was going. The house was large, but it was organized for my life, my routines. "Jessica, honey," I said slowly, "you know the guest room is full of Mary's sewing supplies, and your old room is my office now." I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. That's when the trap was sprung. Jessica exchanged a quick, meaningful look with Mark. A silent conversation passed between them. "A plan? We know, Dad. That's why we have a solution." She pulled a glossy brochure from her designer purse, handed it to me. It showed a big silver bus, smiling seniors playing cards. "The Autumn Leaves Scenic Tour," she announced, her voice too bright, like she was giving me a prize. 2 weeks, all expenses paid. We bought you a ticket." I stared at the brochure. The smiling faces looked trapped. I hated bus tours. I hated organized fun. I hated being herded around like cattle. My idea of a vacation was a quiet lake and a fishing pole, not a name tag and a schedule. "Jessica, I don't want to go on a bus tour," I said firmly. "I'm finishing the rocking horse." "Oh, Dad, don't be stubborn," she chided. Her voice softened into that wheedling tone, the one that used to make me melt. Now it just felt cold. "It'll be good for you," she insisted. "You've been cooped up since Mom passed 2 years ago. You need a change of scenery. The rocking horse can wait." "I like my scenery," I insisted, my voice rising slightly. "And where will Robert and Linda stay if I'm gone?" Mark finally turned around. His smile didn't reach his eyes. He adjusted his expensive cufflinks, a nervous tic he had when he was about to deliver bad news. "We figured they could use your room, Thomas," Mark said smoothly. He used my first name. It felt disrespectful. "It's the master bedroom," he continued. It has the attached bathroom. It just makes sense. They need the space. My room. The room I shared with Mary for 40 years. The request felt like a violation. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy. Mark's smile was fixed, predatory. Jessica was staring at the floor, twisting her ring faster. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, ticking away my life. My room? The words felt heavy in my mouth. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. It felt wrong, invasive. I swallowed hard. The room where her scent still lingered, a ghost of comfort in the darkness. They wanted the heart of the house. They wanted Mary's space and mine. It's just for a couple of weeks, Jessica said quickly. She saw the resistance in my eyes. We'll put everything back exactly how you left it. I promise. She reached out and touched my arm. Please, Dad. My marriage is stressed enough right now. We really need this favor. I looked at my daughter. She looked desperate. So thin, like she was being stretched too tight. When Mary died, lying in that hospital bed, I promised I would always take care of Jessica. Maybe this was taking care of her. Maybe I was just being a selfish old man, clinging to the past. All right, I sighed. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. 2 weeks, but everything goes back, exactly as it was. Of course, Dad. Thank you. You won't regret it. Jessica hugged me. It felt brief, obligatory, like a transaction completed. They left quickly after that. The house felt too quiet. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt watchful, waiting. I knew then I had made a mistake. I just didn't know how big. I had just agreed to my own eviction. The tour left 2 days later. I packed my small suitcase. I felt a profound sense of unease. It felt less like a vacation, more like I was being pushed out, discarded. I locked my workshop carefully, ensuring my tools, the tools I had used to build this life, were safe. At least I thought they were. As I was loading my bag into the taxi, I looked up at my bedroom window. The afternoon sun hit the glass, making it hard to see inside. But I saw movement. Mark was inside. He wasn't just looking. He had a tape measure out. He was measuring the walls. Not the curtains, the walls. It struck me as odd. Invasive. Why measure the walls if you're only staying 2 weeks? What's he doing? I asked Jessica. She was rushing me toward the car, eager to see me gone. Oh, just checking the curtains, she said brightly, avoiding my eyes. A tell. Jessica always looked away when she lied. Linda is very sensitive to light. They might need blackout shades. She slammed the taxi door. Don't worry about it. Have fun. Relax. The taxi pulled away. I watched my house disappear down the street. A cold dread settled over me. The curtains were just the beginning. I didn't have fun. The bus smelled like stale coffee and disinfectant. It was a rolling prison cell. The other passengers were nice enough. Quiet people dealing with their own losses. But the forced cheerfulness of the tour guide grated on my nerves. Her voice was like a drill in my ear. We stopped at diners that served bland, overpriced food. We visited scenic overlooks that were just crowded parking lots. It was torture. Organized torture. I missed my workshop. I missed my chair. I missed the comforting silence of my home. I felt homesick, but it was more than that. It felt like I was losing my grip on my own life. By the 5th day, I called Jessica, just to check in. How are Robert and Linda settling in? I asked. Oh, they're great, Dad. Her voice was too loud, too cheerful. They love the house. They said it has good bones. Good bones, I repeated. I built those bones. They're just making a few small adjustments, she continued quickly. Nothing major, just making it comfortable. Adjustments? My stomach tightened again. The word felt heavy, loaded. What kind of adjustments? Oh, you know, she said vaguely. Just some lighting, a little paint. Don't worry about it. How's the tour? She deflected, changed the subject. The dread deepened. I hung up the phone. Small adjustments. That didn't sound right. Mark didn't do small adjustments. He did grand gestures. Expensive mistakes. But I was stuck on that bus, hundreds of miles away.
Helpless.
I needed someone to talk to. Someone who understood wood and foundations. Someone who understood loyalty. I called my old buddy, Rusty O'Connor. We used to frame houses together back in the day. Rusty was loud, rough around the edges, but solid as oak. He always smelled like cheap cigars and honesty. Rusty, it's Thomas. Thomas, where you been hiding, old man? Rusty boomed over the phone. They sent me on a bus tour. Rusty, I admitted. It's awful. I told him about the situation. The in-laws taking my room. The feeling of being pushed out. The tape measure. The vague talk of adjustments. Rusty listened patiently. I heard the flick of a lighter. Thomas, you built that house, Rusty said. His voice gruff. You own that house. Don't let them make you feel like a guest. He paused. And watch your back with that son-in-law of yours. Merc. He sounds like a weasel in a silk suit. Guys like that, they don't borrow. They take. Rusty's words echoed in my mind. They take. By the 10th day, I couldn't take it anymore. The thought of another 4 days of organized sightseeing made my skin crawl. I felt an urgency I couldn't explain. A need to get back home. Now, I told the tour director I had a family emergency. I bought a train ticket, headed home. 4 days early. I didn't call Jessica. I wanted to see the truth for myself. I wanted my life back. The train ride was long. I stared out the window, watching the landscape blur past. My reflection stared back at me. An old man, tired, worried. What was waiting for me when I got home? The train arrived late in the evening. I took a taxi home. The familiar streets soothed my frayed nerves. The oak tree in the front yard stood tall, a silent sentinel. The house was lit up, warm and inviting against the cool night air. But as I walked up the driveway, something felt different. Off-kilter, the porch light was new, a harsh, bright LED fixture. It replaced the soft, warm bulb I preferred. It cast cold, sterile shadows, like a hospital light. It was a small change, but it felt like a warning. The first sign that things had changed. But it wasn't the last. I reached for my keys. The metal felt cold in my hand. I walked up the steps I had rebuilt. Just last year, I put my key in the lock. It wouldn't turn. I tried again. Nothing. The lock had been changed. I stood on my own porch, the porch I built, locked out of my own house. Confusion turned into a cold realization. They didn't want me to come back. I had to ring the doorbell, my own doorbell. A moment later, the door swung open. It was Jessica. Dad, what are you doing here? Her eyes widened in shock. You're early. She didn't sound happy. She sounded panicked. She quickly stepped outside, pulling the door mostly closed behind her, blocking my way. The tour wasn't for me, I said, trying to keep my voice light. I figured I'd come back and help out. I tried to step inside. She didn't move. Help out? She repeated, her voice high and tight. Dad, you should have called. It's complicated right now. Complicated how? I pushed the door open gently. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It didn't smell like home. It smelled like paint, sharp and acidic, and something spicy and expensive cooking in the kitchen. The lemon polish scent was gone, erased. Are the in-laws still here? I asked. Yes, they are, a voice boomed from the hallway. It was Mark. He appeared behind Jessica. He looked equally unhappy to see me. He was wearing a silk robe, as if he owned the place. Thomas, you really should have called, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. This is awkward. The audacity was staggering. Mark stood in the doorway, blocking the light. His silk robe shimmered in the harsh LED glare. He looked comfortable. Too comfortable. Jessica hovered nervously beside him, twisting her ring. It's my house, Mark, I said, my voice sharp, cutting through the tension. I don't need to call. I brushed past them. Jessica gasped softly. Mark just scoffed, a small, ugly sound. They thought they could control me. They thought I was weak. They were wrong. I headed toward the hallway. I just wanted to sleep in my own bed. I wanted the familiar comfort of my room. I needed to know what they had done. I pushed open the door to my bedroom. Stopped. It wasn't my room anymore. The air in the room was cold, Sterilely. I took a step inside. My foot sunk into the carpet. It was new, thick, plush white, impractical. The walls, Mary's soft blue, the color of the ocean, gone, replaced by a harsh, modern gray, cold slate, like a prison cell. My oak dresser, the one I built, gone, replaced by a sleek white monstrosity. And my bed, the four-poster bed Mary and I shared, gone. I felt the blood drain from my face. I couldn't breathe. The air felt thin, stolen from my lungs. They hadn't just redecorated. They had erased me. They had erased Mary. What have you done? My voice was a hoarse whisper. Jessica hovered in the doorway, wringing her hands. Dad, we decided to update the room while you were gone. A little surprise. A surprise? Robert and Linda needed something more comfortable, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. The old furniture was so dated. Dated my life. Dated? Where is my furniture? I demanded, the panic rising in my chest. Where is my bed? Where are the pictures of your mother? Mark leaned against the doorframe, smug, arrogant. We moved it, Thomas, he said dismissively. It was clutter. This is much cleaner, much more sophisticated. Clutter, Murray's memories. Clutter. Moved it where? I demanded. The cold dread turned into a fiery rage. I felt the heat rise in my face. Jessica looked at the floor, shame flickering in her eyes, but she didn't move. She didn't defend me. The basement, she whispered. I didn't wait for another word. I turned and stormed toward the basement door. I threw it open, flicked on the light. The stairs descended into the damp, cool darkness. The basement was unfinished. It always had been. Laundry, old tools, Christmas decorations. It smelled of dust and damp concrete. And now it held my life. The sight hit me harder than the remodeled room. I stood at the bottom of the stairs. The single bare bulb cast long shadows. The air was cold, damp. It smelled of neglect. My furniture was crammed into the far corner, covered with a thin plastic sheet, like garbage waiting for pickup. I walked over to the pile. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pulled back the plastic sheet. On top was a framed photo. Mary and me, our wedding day. Young, smiling, full of hope. The glass was cracked. The crack ran right through Mary's face. I picked it up, my hands trembling. The broken glass felt like the broken pieces of my life. This wasn't an accident. This was intentional cruelty. I turned around. Jessica and Mark were standing at the top of the stairs, looking down at me like I was the intruder. How could you? I asked. My voice barely a whisper. The grief raw, exposed. Jessica shifted her weight. Defensive. Dad, it's just stuff, she said, trying to minimize the violation. We were trying to make the house nicer. Just stuff. My whole world. Reduced to stuff. Nicer? You erased me. My voice cracked. The sound echoed in the concrete space. You erased your mother. Thomas, calm down, Mark said. Sharp, condescending. We did what we had to do. My parents needed a place. He took a step down the stairs, invading my space, even here. And frankly, this house needed the modernization. You've let it fall into disrepair. Let it fall into disrepair? I maintained this house, meticulously. Every leaky faucet, every loose shim, I fixed it with my own hands. I built this house. He didn't understand the value of things built to last. He knew nothing about this house. He knew nothing about me. I walked up the stairs, the cracked photo clutched in my hand. I stood face to face with my daughter. You promised me, I said, my voice low, dangerous. You promised you would put everything back. The facade cracked, the loving daughter vanished. Cold entitlement beneath. Well, plans changed, Jessica snapped. The renovation on the condo is taking much longer than expected, she continued, her voice gaining confidence. They might be here another month, maybe 2. Another month, maybe 2. The words hit me like a physical blow. They hadn't just taken over. They planned to stay. We couldn't expect them to live in that dreary old room. she added. Dreary. The room filled with love. Dreary. And where am I supposed to sleep? I asked. The reality of the situation sinking in, the humiliation washing over me. Jessica motioned back towards the basement, the dark, damp basement. The silence stretched. Mark smirked. We set you up downstairs. She said, we bought a nice cot. It's very comfortable, a cot. And it's quiet down there, she added, a forced brightness in her voice. You like quiet. A cot, in the basement, like a servant in my own home. The home I built. The humiliation was complete. I needed air. I pushed past them. Went into the living room. Even that had changed. Mary's armchair, gone. Replaced by a modern leather chair. Uncomfortable, cold. The photos on the mantelpiece, gone. Replaced by abstract art. Meaningless shapes. Cold colors. They had stripped the soul from the house. They had stripped the memories. I sat down on the couch. My heart pounded in my chest. They had lied to me, manipulated me. They sent me away so they could take over. And now, they expected me to just accept it, to fade into the background of my own life, to disappear. I wouldn't. I couldn't. But the betrayals weren't over. The next few days were a waking nightmare. I felt like a ghost in the house I built, a phantom haunting the edges of their lives. I slept in the basement. The damp air made my joints ache. The furnace kicked on and off throughout the night. Loud, rattling. Sleep was impossible. Above me I heard their lives continuing. Laughter, music. The clinking of wine glasses. They were entertaining. Hosting parties. In my house. I was an intruder. A nuisance. Robert and Linda, Mark's parents, treated me with polite indifference, as if I were the gardener who had accidentally wandered inside. They were loud, demanding. They criticized everything. The neighborhood, the water pressure, the brand of coffee I bought. Thomas, this coffee is pedestrian, Linda sniffed one morning, pushing the cup away. She wore a silk dressing gown. Her nails were perfectly manicured. We prefer single-origin beans. Perhaps you could run to the store. I just stared at her. I didn't have the energy to fight over coffee, but the resentment simmered, a slow burn, waiting for the right moment to ignite. I tried to find refuge in my workshop, out in the garage. It was the one place they hadn't touched, my sanctuary, the one place I could still be me, or so I thought. I opened the garage door, and my heart sank. The workshop was gone. I opened the garage door, expecting the familiar scent of sawdust and machine oil. Instead, I smelled cardboard and expensive leather. My workbench, my lathe, my tools, everything pushed against the walls, covered in dust sheets, buried. The center of the garage was filled with boxes, floor to ceiling, furniture. It was an invasion, complete and total. They had taken everything, even my work. Mark came out, looking annoyed. He was on the phone, barking orders about some real estate deal. He held up a finger to silence me. I waited, fuming. The anger was a physical presence now. He finally hung up. Careful, Thomas. Don't knock anything over. This is imported Italian leather. He didn't even look at me. He looked at his boxes, his possessions. The dismissal was cold, calculated, and devastating. I stared at the pile of boxes. The space where I worked, the space where I created, gone, replaced by imported leather. The silence in the garage was heavy, filled only by the buzzing of the fluorescent lights. Mark, this is my workshop, I said. My voice tight, barely controlled. Where am I supposed to work? The church auction is next week. Work? He scoffed. The sound was ugly, dismissive. Thomas, you're retired. This is just a hobby. A hobby. My craft. My passion. The thing that kept me sane. A hobby. My blood boiled. The words cut deep, deeper than he knew. We needed the storage space, Mark continued, oblivious to the rage building in front of him. For my parents' furniture until the condo is ready. The dismissal stung deep. I felt a surge of anger. A desire to throw the boxes into the driveway, to smash the imported leather. But I bit my tongue. I knew I couldn't win this fight with force. I had to be smarter. I had to find their weakness. I tried to argue, to demand he move his things. He just talked over me, waving his hand, swatting away a fly. He made me feel small, insignificant, powerless. I turned and walked away, defeated on the surface. But the anger was hardening into something else. Resolve, cold, hard resolve. That evening, dinner was an ordeal. They had ordered in some expensive, complicated food that didn't taste like home. It tasted like money, wasted money. Robert and Linda were talking loudly about their recent trip to Europe. Mark was trying to impress them. Exaggerated tales of his real estate success. Lies built on sand. Jessica fluttered around them, refilling wine glasses, laughing too loudly at their jokes. She looked brittle, fragile, like she might shatter at any moment. I sat quietly, pushing the food around my plate. They ignored me, until the end. Until the insult that broke the camel's back. When the meal was finished, Linda pushed her plate away. She dabbed at her lips with a linen napkin. The conversation stopped abruptly. Everyone looked at her. She smiled faintly. A cold, calculating smile. The crystal chandelier above us seemed to mock me. The air crackled with anticipation. "Thomas, dear," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Would you mind clearing the plates? Jessica looks exhausted from all the hosting." I froze. The table went silent, utterly silent. She was asking me, the owner of the house, the man who built it, to clear her plate, like a servant. The humiliation burned in my chest. Hot and sharp, a searing pain. I lifted Jessica, my daughter. She stared at her lap, shame flickering in her eyes, but she said nothing. She didn't defend me. She didn't tell Linda how inappropriate she was being. She chose them over me. The silence was her complicity, her betrayal. I stood up, slowly, deliberately. I picked up Linda's plate. My hands were shaking with suppressed rage. I carried it to the kitchen. I set it down on the counter. Very gently. The clink of the ceramic was deafening. I leaned against the sink, taking deep breaths. This had to stop. I couldn't live like this. It was time to find out what was really going on, because something felt deeply wrong. This wasn't just about comfort. It was about control and money. The next morning, while everyone was busy, I made a call. Mr. Peterson, he had been our family lawyer for years. He handled the paperwork when Mary and I bought the land, built the house. He was a good man, honest, meticulous. Older than me, but sharp as a tack. "Mr. Peterson, it's Thomas." "Thomas, good to hear from you. How are things?" "I have a slightly odd request," I said, keeping my voice low. I was in the basement, hiding in my own home. "I need a copy of the deed to my house, and I need you to check something for me." "Of course. What is it?" "Check if there have been any recent changes," I said, "or liens against the property." Mr. Peterson paused. "Everything all right, Thomas? You sound troubled." "I hope so," I said, and hung up. I spent the rest of the day in the basement, trying to ignore the stomping footsteps and loud laughter above me. They were celebrating their victory over me. I felt a growing sense of dread. Mark was too arrogant, too comfortable spending money. He didn't seem to have the luxury car, the expensive furniture. The talk of big real estate deals, it didn't add up. He always seemed to be on the verge of success, but never quite reaching it. He was a gambler, a bad one. I felt a terrible premonition, a certainty that this disrespect was just the tip of the iceberg. Something much darker was hiding beneath the surface. I was right, and the truth was worse than I imagined. 2 days later, Mr. Peterson called back. His voice was grave. "Thomas, we need to talk," he said. "In person. I'm coming over." The tone of his voice confirmed my worst fears. My blood ran cold. The basement suddenly felt colder. When Mr. Peterson arrived, I met him outside. We sat on the porch swing, the one I had repaired just last spring. The air was crisp and cool, a stark contrast to the suffocating tension inside the house. Mr. Peterson pulled papers from his briefcase. He polished his glasses, a nervous habit he had before delivering bad news. "Thomas," he started. The house is still in your name. Jessica and Mark were never added to the deed. You are the sole owner. I knew that, I said, relieved. A small victory. I never signed anything to change it. That's the good news, he continued, his expression grim. The bad news is that there have been significant financial movements concerning the property. He paused, letting the words sink in. I braced myself for the impact. Mr. Peterson wouldn't meet my eyes. My stomach churned. The porch swing seemed to sway violently. 3 weeks ago, he said, his voice low and steady, just before you left on your trip, a home equity line of credit. A hulk was opened against this house. A massive one. Nearly the entire equity of the property has been drawn out. I felt the blood drain from my face. The world tilted sideways. What? How is that possible? I never authorized that. I never signed anything. Mr. Peterson looked at me, his eyes filled with controlled anger. It appears your signature was forged on the documents, he said quietly. Forged? They hadn't just invaded my home. They had stolen from me. The notary was a friend of Mark's, he continued. A man named Jake Riley. I've looked into him. He has a history of shady dealings. Complaints filed with the state. He's a known crook. Jake Riley. A name I didn't know, but a name that now held the key to my ruin. He handed me the documents. I looked at the signature. It was my name, but it wasn't my writing. It was shaky, forced, a pathetic imitation. Furthermore, Mr. Peterson added, the money has already been transferred out of the account. It's gone. Gone. Decades of hard work. Gone. Vanished. And the first payment is due next week, he finished. He looked me straight in the eye. I've contacted the bank manager, a Mrs. Eleanor Vance. She's reviewing the file. But Thomas, if that payment isn't made, the bank will initiate foreclosure proceedings. Foreclosure. The twist hit me like a physical blow. Stealing the breath from my lungs, they hadn't just disrespected me. They hadn't just moved me to the basement. They had stolen my home. They had stolen the security I built for my family. The legacy Mary and I created. Decades of hard work, sacrifice. And they were about to lose it all. The betrayal was so vast, so complete. I couldn't breathe. The air felt thin, toxic. Mark hadn't been building a real estate empire. He had been funding a fantasy, a desperate gamble, using my life's work as collateral. He was a fraud, a failure. I thought of Mary, how hard we worked, how much we saved, how proud we were when we finally paid off the mortgage. We had a party. We burned the mortgage papers in the fireplace. She would have been devastated, but she also would have been furious. A fierce determination settled over me, a cold resolve. The fear vanished, replaced by anger. Righteous anger. I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let them destroy everything we had built. I had to protect what was left. I had to fight back. I was going to tear down the life they tried to build on my foundation. If this story has your heart racing, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Every click helps us keep uncovering stories that deserve to be heard. Because sometimes, the biggest battles are fought at home. I thanked Mr. Peterson. My mind was racing, planning, building. I walked back inside. The house felt different now. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a crime scene. I needed to confront Jessica. I needed to see if there was anything left of my daughter in this cold, calculating woman. I found her in the kitchen, arranging expensive flowers in a vase I didn't recognize. The kitchen, too, had been partially updated. New stainless steel appliances hummed loudly, replacing the quiet, reliable ones I had maintained for years. They had spent my money to erase me. I stepped into the kitchen. The bright, sterile light reflected off the new appliances. It felt like an operating room. Jessica, we need to talk, I said, my voice cold and hard. Now, she turned, startled. Dad, what's wrong? You look pale. I know about the Halleck, I said quietly. Her face crumpled. The facade shattered. She dropped the flowers on the counter. Expensive blooms scattered across the floor. She started to cry. Loud, racking sobs. But the tears didn't move me, not this time. They looked like crocodile tears. He said it was safe, she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. He said the real estate deal was guaranteed. It was supposed to fix everything. We were going to pay it back before you even noticed, she continued, desperate. We just needed the capital. You knew? I asked, my heart breaking, the last shred of hope dying inside me. The realization that my own daughter was complicit. You knew he forged my signature? You knew he was stealing from me? You risked my home? Your mother's home? I didn't want to, she cried, looking up at me. Pathetic? But Mark said we needed the money. Then her voice hardened. The entitlement returned. The ugly truth beneath the tears. He said you were being selfish, she accused, holding on to all this equity when we were struggling. He said you owed us. After everything we did for you, owed them. For what? For moving in and taking over my life. For treating me like garbage. The sheer entitlement was staggering. She genuinely believed they had a right to my property. My life. You can't tell the police, Dad. Please, she begged, clutching my arm. They'll take him to jail. We'll be ruined. Think of my reputation, she pleaded. Think of Robert and Linda. She was begging me to protect the man who had ruined us both. She was begging me to sacrifice my dignity, my security, for the sake of their reputation. I looked at her. I felt a profound sadness. The daughter I loved was gone, replaced by a woman who was willing to sacrifice her father for a lie, for a lifestyle she hadn't earned. I pulled my arm away. I don't know you anymore, I said. The words were final. Mark came into the kitchen, alerted by Jessica's crying. Robert and Linda were right behind him, their faces masks of concern. What's going on? Why are you upsetting her? Mark demanded, putting a protective arm around Jessica. The predator protecting his accomplice. I know about the fraud, Mark, I said, my voice steady, the rage replaced by a cold resolve. I know about Jake Riley. Mark's arrogance vanished, replaced by a flicker of fear. The mention of Riley's name shook him. But then he recovered quickly, his expression hardening into defiance. He was cornered and dangerous. All right, fine, you found out, he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. So what? You weren't using the money anyway. He took a step toward me, aggressive, threatening. You were just sitting here, wasting away in this old dump. We needed it. We deserve it. Robert and Linda looked confused, nervous. They didn't know the extent of the damage yet. What fraud? Mark, what is he talking about? Robert demanded. Mark ignored him, focusing his rage on me. You're a selfish old man, Thomas, he spat. You always have been. You think you're so superior with your sawdust and your tools. But you're nothing. This house is nothing. This house is everything I have, I said calmly. And you stole it from me? You're a thief, Mark, I continued, and you're about to lose everything. I walked away, leaving them in the kitchen. The silence was heavy, suffocating. I had a plan to take back what was mine, and to ensure they paid for what they did. I called Mr. Peterson again. I was back in the basement, the only place I felt safe anymore. I need you to initiate the fraud investigation with the bank, I said. You mentioned the manager, Eleanor Vance. Push her, show her the forgery. Tell her we are going to the police. I've already met with Ms. Vance, Mr. Peterson said. She is a very thorough woman. When she saw the documents, she was appalled. The bank does not take kindly to this level of fraud. She's already contacted their legal department. Eleanor Vance, a new player on the board, an ally I didn't expect. Good, I said, and I need you to contact the police. Ask for Detective Davis. He's handled financial crimes before. I know him from the church council. I'm ahead of you, Thomas. Detective Davis is expecting my call. But I also need you to do something else, I said. Something complicated. I explained my plan. It was risky, expensive, a gamble that could leave me with nothing. My last roll of the dice. But I looked at the cracked photo of Mary. I knew it was the only way to save the house. To ensure justice was served, I had to take the risk. It will take everything you have, Thomas, Mr. Peterson warned. Your entire retirement savings. Are you sure? Mary and I saved that money for our future, I said, my voice firm. This is my future. Do it. The wheels were turning. The trap I was building was almost ready. The hammer was about to. The next few days were a blur of activity, hidden in plain sight. The pressure in the house was escalating. The phone rang constantly. Creditors, Mark's big real estate deal had collapsed completely. The money he had stolen was gone, vanished into the pockets of other, smarter thieves. He was ruined, and he knew it. The mask was slipping. Mr. Peterson and Eleanor Vance worked quickly. The bank confirmed the forgery. They froze the Hollick account, but the money was already gone. Detective Davis began his investigation. He started looking for Jake Riley, the notary. Riley had disappeared, vanished like smoke. But Davis was good. He would find him. The official foreclosure notice arrived, taped to the front door, a scarlet letter, advertising our shame to the neighborhood. I watched from the window as Mark ripped it down, his face pale, his hands shaking. The arrogance was gone, replaced by terror. The walls were closing in on him. The walls I built. Mark became frantic, pacing the house, shouting at Jessica, trying to secure another loan, another lifeline, but it was too late. The word was out. He was toxic. Nobody would touch him. The ship was sinking, and the rats were starting to flee. The final blow came at dinner. Robert and Linda realized the truth. Their comfortable life was threatened. They turned on Mark and Jessica. The facade of the loving family shattered into a million pieces. How could you be so stupid? Robert roared at Mark. They were in the dining room. I was in the kitchen, listening to the destruction. The dining room went silent. I heard the clink of a fork dropping onto a plate. You mortgaged this house without securing the investment? Robert continued, incredulous. And you lied to us about the condo renovation. There was no renovation, was there? You sold the condo months ago. They weren't just broke. They were homeless. They had come here not for a visit, but to stay. They had planned to take over from the start. Linda's voice was venomous. We thought you were successful. We thought you had money. She looked at Mark with disgust. Instead, you're a fraud, a failure, and you dragged us into your mess. They didn't care about the house, or Jessica, or even their own son. They only cared about the money, the comfort, the reputation. They were exactly like Mark. Shallow, greedy, heartless. The next morning, they were gone. They packed their bags, got into their luxury car, the one they probably couldn't afford either. I watched them drive away, without a word to Mark or Jessica. They left them to face the consequences alone, cowards. The house was quiet for the first time since I returned. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of Jessica's muffled sobs coming from the living room. It was time. Time for the final act. I walked into the living room. Jessica was sitting on the expensive leather sofa, wrought with stolen money. Sobbing hysterically, Mark was slumped in the modern leather chair, pale, defeated. He finally understood the magnitude of what he had done. The fraud, the debt, the impending jail time. He looked small. They looked up as I entered the room. I stood in the center of the room, old, composed. I looked at the mess they had made, the destruction they had caused. The sterile modern furniture seemed to mock them, a symbol of the life they had tried to steal. Dad, Jessica whispered, her voice raw, broken. What are we going to do? We're going to lose the house. Mark is going to jail. We have nowhere to go. We have nothing. I took a deep breath. The moment I had been waiting for, the moment I had orchestrated, had finally arrived. The foreclosure has been stopped, I said quietly. Jessica looked up, a flicker of desperate hope in her eyes. You fixed it. Oh, thank God. You talked to the bank. You forgave the debt. The debt is settled, I continued, my voice unwavering. Mark sat up straighter, a glimmer of his old arrogance returning. I knew it, he sneered. I knew you had money hidden away. You let us panic. You old manipulator. They still didn't understand. They still thought they could escape the consequences. They still underestimated me. I didn't fix it, I said, my voice cold and hard. Mr. Peterson did. They stared at me, confused. Mr. Peterson, my lawyer, I explained. He found a private investor who bought the debt from the bank. They paid off the HELOC in full. Why would they do that? Mark asked, suspicion narrowing his eyes. Because the house is a good investment, I said. And because they trust Mr. Peterson. The investor is now the lien holder on this property. The house is safe. Jessica started to cry again, this time in relief. Thank you, Dad. Thank you. We can fix this. We can pay the investor back. We can start over. I looked at my daughter. I felt a profound sadness. She still thought she could have it all. She still thought there were no consequences for her actions. No, Jessica, I said. You can't. I walked over to the window, looking out at the yard. The oak tree Mary and I planted. Strong, tall, a testament to the enduring power of love and hard work. Things they knew nothing about. The investor has decided to take possession of the property immediately, I continued, my voice steady. They are planning to renovate it and sell it. The silence in the room was absolute. What are you talking about? Mark said, his voice trembling. We live here. This is our home. I turned to face them. My daughter, the stranger, wearing my child's face. The man who had poisoned her heart. This was my home. I corrected him. The home I built with Mary. You were guests, and you violated my trust, my hospitality, and the...
I took a deep breath.
Delivering the final blow, the climax I had built. I waited for the words to sink in. I watched their faces shift, from relief to confusion, to dawning horror. The sterile, modern room felt cold around us. The silence stretched, taut as a piano wire. The investor is me, I said quietly. Mr. Peterson set up a trust, I explained, my voice steady, strong. I used my retirement savings. The savings I had planned to leave to Jessica to buy back the debt that you stole. I smiled. A sad, weary smile, but a smile nonetheless. I am the sole owner, the sole creditor, and I am evicting you. Pack your things, I said, my voice soft but firm. You have until tomorrow morning to leave. They didn't expect that. The shock was palpable. Jessica stared at me, mouth open, in shock, eyes wide with disbelief. Dad, you're kicking us out? Your own daughter? Her voice rose hysterically. We have nowhere to go. You should have thought of that before you stole from me, I said, my voice cracking with emotion. Before you moved me to the basement, before you erased your mother's memory, before you tried to erase me from my own life. Mark jumped to his feet, his face red with rage. You can't do this. You vindictive old man. We'll fight you in court. You can try, I said calmly. But you have no money, no lawyer, and a mountain of evidence against you. I paused. Eleanor Vance at the bank is pursuing criminal charges. Detective Davis is investigating the fraud. They found Jake Riley. He confessed. Mark, he implicated you. His bluster faded. Fear returned, stark and real. He knew it was over. You will be arrested, I continued. It's just a matter of time. But we're family, Jessica cried, tears streaming down her face, the ultimate weapon of the entitled. Family doesn't steal, I said, my voice heavy with grief. Family doesn't betray. Family doesn't treat each other like garbage. I looked at her one last time. You made your choices. Now you have to live with the consequences. They argued. They pleaded. They threatened. But I stood firm. The decision was made. The damage was done. The trust was broken. Irreparable. The next morning, they packed their things in silence. The arrogance, the entitlement, the greed, all gone, replaced by a crushing weight of reality. Later that afternoon, a police car pulled up. Detective Davis and another officer, stern, by the book. I watched from the porch as they arrested Mark. Forgery, fraud, grand larceny. They put him in handcuffs and took him away. He didn't even look at Jessica. He didn't look sophisticated anymore. I watched Jessica carry her bags to the car. A cheap, used sedan. They had bought it after the luxury car was repossessed. As she was about to leave, I handed her an envelope. She opened it, her hands trembling. Inside was a check. It's enough for a deposit on a small apartment, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. And the contact information for a good therapist. I paused. A final act of parental duty. Not forgiveness. Not yet. She looked at me, her eyes filled with shame, despair, and a flicker of understanding. She wanted forgiveness. I had none left to give. The pain in her eyes mirrored the pain in my heart. A tearing realization that the bond between us was shattered. Maybe forever, she nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks, and walked away. I watched her drive off. I didn't know if I would ever see her again. I was alone. The house was quiet. It felt empty again, but it was a different kind of empty. It was clean, purged. I walked through the rooms, reclaiming my space. I went into the garage. I called the church charity, told them I had a large donation. They came and picked up the boxes of expensive Italian furniture. My tools were back in their rightful place. My workbench cleared. I picked up the sandpaper, started working on the rocking horse again. The familiar rhythm against the wood soothed my soul. The smell of sawdust filled the air. It smelled like home again. It smelled like victory. Later that week, I started the restorations, not the sterile modern updates Mark had envisioned. Restorations. I called Rusty. He came over. We laughed. We worked. We ripped up the plush white carpet. Restored the hardwood floors beneath. We drank beer and told old stories. We repainted my bedroom, the soft blue that Mary loved, the color of the ocean. I went down to the basement. Retraded my furniture, the solid oak dresser, the four-poster bed. Rusty helped me carry them upstairs. Heavy but satisfying. I repaired the cracked photo of Mary, placed it on the bedside table, right where it belonged. I sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress firm and familiar. The room smelled faintly of paint and lemon polish, but beneath it, I could still smell the ghost of Mary's lavender soap. I had lost my daughter, and I had sacrificed my retirement savings, but I had saved my home, my dignity, and the memory of the life Mary and I had built. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. It was bittersweet, heavy with loss, but it was real. I was home, and I was finally safe. Thanks for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please rate it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Your support means the world, because your time matters.